I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro.
Thank you. Administrator Power, thank you for joining us today. And of course, I'd normally ask you about locally led development and some of your great work there at USAID, but I want to ask you obviously about the very urgent situation, humanitarian situation in Gaza. In your testimony, you said that the entire population of Gaza is living under the threat of famine. News reports came out recently that certain USAID officials sent a cable to the National Security Council warning that famine is already likely occurring in parts of the Gaza Strip. According to the report, quote, famine conditions are most severe and widespread in northern Gaza, which is under Israeli control. Do you think that it's plausible or likely that parts of Gaza, and particularly northern Gaza, are already experiencing famine?
Well, the methodology that the IPC used is one that we had our experts scrub. It's one that's relied upon in other settings, and that is their assessment, and we believe that assessment is credible.
So there's famine is already occurring there.
That is,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And more than half of the population of Gaza is under the age of 18, as you know, and are seriously affected by the lack of access to food and nutrition. And various organizations, including the United Nations, have warned that hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children may die if they don't get necessary food and nutrition assistance in just the next 2 to 3 weeks. Has USAID made such an assessment itself? And do you have a sense of how many such children might be at risk of dying if they don't get access to food and nutrition that's currently unavailable?
I do not have those assessments on hand, but I will say that in northern Gaza, the rate of malnutrition prior to October 7th was almost 0, and it is now 1 in 3 kids. But extrapolating out is hard. And I will say, just with some humility, because it is so hard to move around in Gaza, because the access challenges that give rise in part to the malnutrition are so severe, it is also, hard to do the kind of scaled assessments that we would wish to do. But in terms of, actual severe acute malnutrition for under 5s, that rate was 16% in January and became 30% in February. And we're awaiting the March numbers, but we expect it to
So it got
continue
markedly worse.
Yeah, markedly worse, but extrapolating and giving you the overall numbers.
And just to be clear, I realize you're not part of the DoD or the State Department in working on these issues diplomatically, but is it your understanding that humanitarian assistance and food assistance is not supposed to be denied even when countries are at war with each other? Because there is this argument that, well, if Hamas would release the hostages, if they would surrender, that this would stop. But there's certain laws of war and certain conduct that nations are supposed to follow, and that includes allowing for humanitarian assistance.
Correct. I mean, I will say, of course, and we all agree, the hostages should be released.
Absolutely.
It's an absolute outrage that they have been kept this long, and the horror and terror for the families of those individuals I can't even contemplate. But yes, food must flow.
But
and
kids can't be starved because you have two groups that are at war with each other.
Food must flow, and food has not flowed in sufficient quantities to avoid this imminent famine in the south and these conditions that are giving rise already to child deaths in the north.
And I'm down to 1 minute, so part of this maybe we'll ask for the record, but in response to questions from my colleague, Representative Wild of Pennsylvania, you said that there have been restrictions on U.S. humanitarian assistance. You also referenced the National Security Memorandum 20 as taking into account future restrictions, and you said that that was a process that Secretary Blinken was leading. Given USAID's expertise on these issues, was USAID, and in particular the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, provided an opportunity to weigh in to the State Department's determination under NSM 20 that Israel's assurances that is following U.S. and international law are, quote, credible and reliable?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your work, and I yield back.